Hello, in this video I want to focus on the number 108 and how it applies to, well, across cultures and across the world. Very similar to a version of this I posted a few months back, but I did, amongst them I did make an error, and I'm going to be correcting that in this video. But it's not a direct repost because I'll be adding a whole bunch of other information, and essentially I want to review a number of recent posts. So there's many hours. I know people don't have time, and it's probably a bit too much because they move so quickly and so much information. So this one I'm going to focus on the number 108, and to begin with. So the two most recent posts had to do with the Iron Pillar of Delhi and Kailasa Temple in India, as well as previous to that about Chinese legends and the use of this particular number. Now, I didn't focus on 108 in those, I was just a smaller part of it, but we're going to do it on 108, and also to review several places. Again, I know there's been many hours in regards to Australia, but we'll just run through them and just to show the links. But for instance, the Iron Pillar of Delhi, the capital of 108 grains on the Cremona scale. Kailasa Temple in the Ellora Caves, 108 feet wide, while in ancient China, for instance, there's become a saying of one must walk 10,800 li to reach wisdom, while in Shaolin, for instance, 108 postures, but also in Sun Wukong and the Journey to the West, he was able to do 10,800 li per somersault. So 108, 10,080, 10,800 and 108,000. We'll see these going. But Governor Lachlan Macquarie, he set the street widths in basically across all Australia, 66 feet, with a carriageway of 42 feet. So that's 108 Cremona hands. So basically, if you're in Australia, 108 is one of these defining numbers. In Sydney, in Hyde Park on Elizabeth Street, we have the obelisk, which is, well, 72 feet, but that's 1,080 Doric fingers high. Now we'll see this will carry on. So, for instance, Anzac Memorial, the reflecting pool at the front, again 1,080 Doric fingers high. Now, whether you're in Paris, London, New York, basically anywhere, you're going to find that your sculptures, your main public buildings, have this exact same pattern going on. Customs House in Newcastle, again I did a long video on that, but Customs House on its own, 1,080 Cremona inches high, by James Barnett. So a bit of a focus on this particular architect. So Nora Head Lighthouse in Australia, here not far from Sydney, 1,080 inches high. Now, he was not the architect responsible, but his plans were brought in by another architect. Edmund Blackett, another one of these key figures in Australian architecture, very esoteric throughout his whole building. So Sydney University, the same height as Nora Head, 1,080 inches high, 1,080. St Saviour's Cathedral in Goulburn, the transepts north to south, 1,080 Doric inches high. This will repeat again. So, St Mary's Cathedral, but that's not by Edmund Blackett, but it's a Catholic cathedral, so not just Anglicans, Catholics have it too, and 10,080 grains Cremona in length. In Sydney, the Prince Alfred Square, again Prince Alfred links Masonic very much. The obelisk, 108 hands high, or 1,080 Doric grains wide. The area directly around it, that's 32 feet, another link. Sydney Town Hall, again, he's been featured in many videos. George McRae, 108 Cremona cubits high. Now, Cremona and these other, they've fallen out of use. We won't find them in modern references, but these architects at the time and in early videos, I established that they were using these measures. They were published, used very commonly at the time. But okay, QVB by George McRae, the concert hall, which has been renovated, but originally 108 Cremona hands high. Black Totem sculpture in Newcastle by very celebrated artist Brett Whiteley, but 108 hands high. You'll see the same artists, same architects in the modern and the ancient world again. Aqua Helix Central Station in Sydney, 108 hands, 108 hands high again. Now again, across the world you'll find these same measures. Canberra, across Europe, Canada, America, New Zealand, across the world. Major public memorials, not just some random house or shed I've just picked out of nowhere. Very important. In Canberra, capital city of Australia, Australia's version of Washington, that was 108 as well. Parliament House in Canberra, very much just like Capitol building in Washington, multiple references to 108 feet, 108 in number of windows and heights, etc. Well, Canberra Parliament House, we have the same thing again, across multiple scales of measure, repeated over. Staying in Canberra, the Carillon, the bell tower, now the bells are set at between a height of, well, again, 1,080 or 1,440 inches. Some other references to 108 in there as well, but they're geometric, so I won't focus them. Back to Edmund Blackett in the capital city of Western Australia, the state of Western Australia. 1,080 grains is the nave width. Now, if you think this is just a one-off, again, modern architects are doing it as well. Notice even 108 St George's Terrace, the main street of Perth, Western Australia, and it's 1,080 span high. Modern architects are just repeating this. I.M. Payne, Norman Foster, at the moment, they're doing it over and over again. Staying in Perth, the brand new Spander sculpture, whenever they do a news feed from Perth, they've always got this in the background. 1,080 Doric inches high. You can also see St George's Terrace, 108, which is also 1080 span high again. Repeated over and over again, constantly, just to eliminate any notion of coincidence, because it's not. It crosses Scotland. We're gonna go long journey through this throughout all of recorded history across all the world. But just to set the stage, Swan Tower, Western Australia, Perth, again 1080. While St George's Terrace itself, multiple other references to these very important esoteric numbers. But we see the same thing happening again, but on the Royal Babylonian scale. These they were and they are still using ancient scales of measure. It's just sort of hidden in modern scales, so it goes throughout Perth. But across the world, across the central key buildings, the major monuments, the major public buildings, the ones where massive amounts of money go to, you're going to find the same references reappearing over and over again. Again, it's not cherry picking just some random building. There's a very specific set of numbers that get repeated over. For instance, now let's begin. So we have the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Washington. The dome is 108 feet. Now in this next particular piece I'm going to be focusing on 108 feet. I could do countless other, again, major public buildings and memorials, huge amounts of money in the very centre of town. The iconic structures have this repeated constantly, and this is not just modern, and by modern I mean in the last 200 years, or in the most modern, very Masonic. So for instance, the George Washington National Masonic Memorial, the hill was lowered to 108 feet. The literature will commonly say that this was done by accident or for some convenience, but as you examine it more and more, you'll find that this is absolutely not the case. It's a global system that goes back not just centuries, but thousands and thousands of years back to the beginning of recorded time. In Malaysia, the Buddha, 108 feet. The Grand Mosque in Paris, 108 feet. This crosses cultures, crosses religions. The Indian and Hindu, Buddhist, Christian major sculptures, major artworks, all have these, even going back. So the Imam Mosque, in Isfahan in Iran, one of the major important ones, historically one of the greatest of these, 108 feet high, the Iwan facing the Qiblas. But the Grand Mosque in Paris has this same pattern repeated. Christ the King in Poland, 108 feet high. The Pope, so 1941, 1887, these major Christian sculptures, statues will have 108 feet in them. Now again, I could break down into smaller units and how it's repeated, but 108 feet, just to show absolutely that this is not by accident. So the monument of a cross in Armenia, 108 feet high. In Madrid, the 108 feet wide dome. St Paul's in Liverpool, England, 108 feet high. The Speyer Cathedral in Germany, 108 feet high. Notre Dame Cathedral, under the vault, it's 108 feet. St Paul's Tower in Scotland, again, this goes back quite some time, it's 108 feet high. The great cathedrals going back to the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th century, repeated over and over the use of 108 feet. In Bolivia, so the Christ statue there, it's 108 feet wide between the fingertips. So sometimes the height, sometimes the width, sometimes the depth. Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, Hindu, Jain, you're going to find it repeated over and over again. And there's even, you'll see how it echoes through. So for instance, Manitoba, the legislative building in Manitoba, which is one of these, is also 666 units high, but that's a separate topic again. But they use these very specific, very important, very specific set of numbers. 108 is a Hashad number, so 1 plus 0 plus 8 equals 9. 108 divided by 9 is 12, so it divides into whole digits. Every number that's on the 9 times table essentially will be a Hashad number. That's one of the reasons why these particular numbers is so important. But the units of measure, Taj Mahal, one of the most famous iconic buildings in the world, the central arch is 108 feet high. Again, this will be repeated. It goes throughout all across the globe, all across ancient cultures which are supposedly separate. Supposedly, the standard theory is that these, such as Sumer, the Indus, and Egypt, just happened to emerge at the same time, but they were developed separately. That's the standard version of history, but that version of history is a complete nonsense, and the weights and the measures, as I'll just keep repeating through so many videos, just go to prove that. Now, in the Hindu world, in recent times, we have the use of 108 feet constantly in use. So that in the Hindu and the Buddhist world, 108, because of it, the importance of that number in the traditions and beliefs is very important. But so in Italy, Monument to the Fallen, 108 feet high. One Tree Hill in Auckland, New Zealand, that's also 108 feet high. War memorials, religious shrines and statues. In Darmstadt, the 108 feet high again, but okay, so in Russia, supposedly the atheist communist Russia, they were still using this same method. For instance, the Motherland Calls, the sword itself is 108 feet high. 108 feet is 32.9 meters, so you'll often see it referred to as 33 meters, but you scratch it a little bit deeper, because it's often, they'll even use it 33 meters on structures that were long before the meter was officially being used, but the meter itself is an ancient unit as well. Biggest stupa in Europe, in 108 feet high. Again, in Penang, the Buddha there, 108 feet long. In now called Myanmar, formerly Burma, you're going to see the same unit being used again. So 108 feet high flagstaff, 324 feet itself is a breakdown, 108 bow trees. In China, the Yashan Jade Temple, 108 feet high with 33 levels on top of that. In the Byabjusa Buddha in Korea, again, relatively recent, but 108 feet high. 108 across in Wat Pho, and again in Burma, the Chowk Hat Gi Pagoda, sorry for the pronunciation, but that has 108 symbols on the feet, because according to legend, when the Buddha died, each of his feet had 108 auspicious symbols on them. So across the Buddhist world, modern times, but again going back to legend in ancient times, but also in And again, all the various sects of Buddhism will carry this through. For instance, in Tibet, 108 gates and 108 chapels. This is a very auspicious number. It's a very important number, and it's just constantly repeated over and over. So also in China, the Ningxia, once again, sorry for pronunciation, but again, that goes back to the 12th century. There's 108 stupas on there. I sort of began with an intro, but for instance, Sun Wukong journeyed to the west. He could leap 108,000 li in a single somersault. While across Chinese literature, such as the 108 Stars of Destiny, it just follows through. Now, in the infinite sea of numbers, that these very small group is just repeated over and over again across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and across North Africa. Surely there's something to it. Now, it can you simply cannot dismiss it because it's measurable, it's countable, it's observable. There's something to it. Now, individually, you could say, well, because of this, because of that, but we're going to see how it goes across the entire globe and across to places where units of measure shouldn't exist, and where the numbers really should have no connection, but they absolutely do. It's just repeated over and over. 108 beads, of course, on the Japamala is one of these most often referred to. Now, there's also on baseballs, there's 108 stitches, but now the Eastern world in Eastern legend. So the connection between Vishnu and 108, even on his throwing disc, I think there was 108 blades. In yoga, 108 salutations, sun salutations on the spring equinox. And, of course, again, showing recent Hindu statues and that the use of 108 feet. Now, this is apparently a Western unit of measurement, but also I've sort of showed in earlier videos, well, no, that's just not really the case. Now, in Sri Lanka, the rank of Vihira was reduced to 100 feet around about the 14th century. Not exactly sure on that number. Kailasa temple, 108 feet wide. Now, the Canberra as well, I believe, is 108 feet wide as well. Again, countless others. Prambanan in Indonesia. Now those towers are smaller. There's a central tower, but the two smaller on either side, 108 feet. Because they've been reconstructed, that's hard to say, but we'll include them anyway, because of all the other connections. Across the Greater Angkor, 108 feet, the use of 108 symbolically as well, the number of towers and shrines around the outside. And again, even a churning of the Milky Way, the Nagas and this the struggle that's been often repeated in others. But the Sun Temple in Madeira, so there's 108 smaller shrines around the pool. In Shaolin as well, again, we introduced with that, but 108 movements, while 108 chakras and pressure points across martial arts, acupuncture, again, Eastern tradition. Whether it's in the number, symbolically, in the use of other forms, but also the use of this, again, this particular measurement and how they come to use it. Well, it's because the history of weights and measures is laughably out of touch with the observable and the measurable across the world, across time, and across cultures. And so there we see the Eastern world, and we've touched on the Christian world and secular parts. Now, there are many other, for instance, in Soviet Russia and the Eastern Bloc countries at the time, war memorials in supposedly secular countries. We just really, it's a constant across all the religions, all the faiths, and these again are the iconic, most important structures. Again, I'm not just some hokey little tin shed whereof you can eventually, if you look at enough buildings, you'll find a measurement that suits you, but that's not the method being employed here. These are the grand structures, the ones at the very centres of these great cities, and ancient cities too. But for instance, the Tahira Aranda, 108 feet wide dome. The Grand Mosque in Samarra, 108 feet wide at the base. Now, the King Khalid Airport, modern in Saudi Arabia, 108 feet wide dome with 33 arches along the Royal Pavilion as well. In in the Islamic world, especially in relatively modern Saudi Arabia, that they're using this over the, and it just keeps getting repeated, shows that there's actually there's something under the surface in regards to this. There is um, there is a movement, there is a group. Now, alternatively, you could say it's somehow built into our DNA or some other type of explanation like that. But if we just stick with, well, 108 shrines, the Mutiny Memorial, which was in India, but was built sort of by the British for the natives had a revolt, and that's 108 feet high. Saint Moritz. In Switzerland, the bell tower was surviving from the 1570. Well, that's 108 feet high. Segovia Cathedral in Spain, again, the vaults is 108 feet. You're going to find in cathedrals and churches, 108 feet wide, 108 feet high, 108 feet long across the world. Some other examples, well, there's countless examples. Now, the Hagia Sophia, because there's been some movement and built, but anyway, the 108 feet we see there as well. But in Alanya, the Red Tower, amongst many others, it's also 108 feet high tower. In Germany, sorry, is that in Holland? But the keep there was 108 feet high. That was the house of the German royalty, their original location. 4th century AD, Aksum in Ethiopia, the stela, the obelisk there, or the largest one, which is now fallen, 108 feet. The baths of Caracalla in ancient Rome, the vaults were 108 feet high. The Pantheon, another one of these iconic, enigmatic structures. Now that it survived so long, it's still one of the biggest domes in the world. But the portico, so the entrance there, is 108 feet high. Now, each one of these also contains all these other very important references to important measures. So it's not just 108 feet on its own, but okay, the King Herod and the Royal Stoa in that was 108 feet high. Now, also 108 feet wide, but anyway, but in itself, you'll find all these very important sculptures, not just the one unit of measure, but you'll find the others too, such as 27.3. Central or Mesoamerica were using this as well. Now, apparently, they were completely disconnected from Western world, and yet not just one, not just two, you'll find it repeated over and over. And there are many other examples. So, for instance, the causeways, etc. They're also 108 feet, well, including these other very specific measurements, such as 66 feet, you'll find, or 115, but that's off topic. But anyway, this very important pyramid. Now, the older pyramid underneath, as best is been able to measure, that is 108 feet high. So that the current pyramid was built on top of even older one, 108 feet. And they'll also again have multiple references, astronomical references. Now, Abu Simbel, this is one, the whole story, that's an amazing one that was saved from the Aswan Dam. Again, each multiple references, even alignments to solar events, astronomical events, but the facade of Big Abu Simbel, 108 feet, and those statues, incidentally, are 66 feet high, which again is repeated across over to even Central American pyramids and the structures there, but again, 66 feet, that's a different story. 108 feet. The Oshoro stone circles in Japan. Now, the exact date is not too sure, but they're pretty much at least 2,000 years old, probably older than that, and that's 108 feet north to south. Now, east to west at 72 feet, well, that's also on the 108 scale. Again, okay, a great pool of Mohenjo-Daro going back 4,000 years at least. Again, 108 feet wide. So that's in Pakistan, but the Indus Valley, ancient Egypt. Okay, Orkney in Scotland, Salt Knowe, 108 feet wide. Again, not just one example. You can't just cherry pick one and say it's a pattern. But if you just say the Hurler stones, amongst each one of these stones has this very significant, very oft repeated measurements, but the northern one is 108 feet. The Trippet stones, 108 feet diameter as well. And again, these are going back to 2000 BC or even older. Well, the King's Men, 108 feet diameter. The grey Wethers, we have two there, so 105 feet on the other and 108 feet here. Now, 105 feet, sorry, now I'm just, because it just occurred to me, it's been a while since I looked at these, and since now I've discovered 105 feet, so the other grey Wethers is also 1080 on the Cremona scale, as we saw earlier in Newcastle, while Stonehenge, which is the most famous, 108 feet wide as well. So including in these, it's just occurring to me now, like how many, well, on the Cremona scale, which I was unaware of at the time, as well as some other ancient units of measure, how they so often tee up together. And again, it's not just one unit of measure or one proportion. They have multiple references to those. And for instance, Salt Knowe, 131 feet. Well, I actually would believe that it's 132, but because of the erosion since then and the difficulty in measuring earth mounds, because it's hard to find the exact point. Now let's jump way forward in time. So Discovery Science Center in California. So this would be very much a secular building, but the black cube is 108 feet high. Panama Canal and the Suez Canal both have 108 feet in. So for instance, 108 feet on the locks in Panama Canal is to allow 108 feet maximum beam. 110 would also bring us a whole other set of these very esoteric numbers, but again, so through shipping and, well, now lighthouses repeated again. So lighthouses are these very important public structures, and that they vital matters of life and death, and again very much connected to navigation, such as the clock and the compass, which are underlying themes throughout this whole series that I've been doing to show how these numbers merge in together. Now that I see that, I think the bridge itself is 108 feet, the old Little Belt Bridge, or the deck, but I might have mislabeled that the deck is 108 feet or the bridge is itself, but either way it is 108 feet. Of course, Suez, Panama Canal. Crystal Palace is another one of these, 108 feet, the central transept, but the other divisions of it itself will bring us to 108 feet constantly. The Nazis, they built this the La Coupole, that was going to be a launching site for V2 rockets. It's 108 feet high as well. Piacenza Cathedral, so 108 Romanesque columns, the 108 stops in the pipe in St. Paul's in London. Now I can't pronounce German monument, I don't know what, 1902, but again 108 feet. Gilbert Bourdin started like a cult, but he was later destroyed shortly after, 108 feet high. The largest Jain sculpture in the world, relatively new, that's 108 feet. Recently did a video on this this new sculpture in India, and the largest lingam in the world, 108 feet high. Several dams, historically important ones, but for instance, the Scrivener Dam in Canberra began with the amount of in Canberra, Australia, how 108 is just repeated, and also repeated inside of itself across multiple forms, such as Parliament House. But that's again 108 feet high. So in the Odyssey, Odysseus returns and there's 108 suitors vying for Penelope. Now, in the Bible and these other ancient texts, you'll find certain numbers are repeated, and they're very important in regards to astronomy, weights and measures, geometry, and it's not done by accident, because why don't they just choose why isn't some random number just pop up out of nowhere? No, it's because they're picking 108 or 153 or 288, 273, the same ones that are just repeated across the modern world, especially in regards to esoteric, occult, architecture, Freemasons, etc. But the ancient weights and measure scales, 108 grains. The Byzantine, the imperial, the geometric fathom 108 dactyloi. King Edward III reintroduced the florin of 108 grains because it was already being used in earlier in Italy, but you'll find it will fall out of favour, but it'll come back in, or the yardstick, so 108 barleycorn. And even the word yardstick, has important meanings. And words such as on the level, it's a square house, these all originate from, Masonic, Oddfellows, Templars in the modern world, but they're very important. They have a meaning beyond that. They've got to do with weights and measures, but also about truth and honesty. And truth and honesty in weights and measures is a constant going back to the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It's in the Bible. It's in so many other places. But 108 cubic feet, a stack of timber, one pipe or a butt of beer and wine, that's 108 gallons. Here in Australia, we're very much born out of the esoteric, but even on modern scale, on the way the radio frequency have chosen, both AM and FM have this connection to 108 or 1080. While why is HD television 1080 or 1440 or 576 on this exact same scale of measures? The modern masters of weights and measures, the bureaus of weights and measures, repeat it over and over again and again. And why didn't they choose a decimal number in this supposedly new decimal? But they chose these particular divisions for the same reasons the ancient cultures did. So the base 12 system, so 12 times 5 is 60, so that's why we have 60 minutes and 60 seconds. 3 times 12 is 36, why we have a 360-degree compass. Because these divisions have very practical uses, but they're also very important in astronomy and arithmetic and across the liberal arts. But anyway, the vesica 108, octagons 1080, the angles in the pentagram, the set square, all these tools that are very modern that we still use have them. Now this is why one of the reasons I wanted to repair this, because I made a mistake in regarding this arithmetic here. But you can see how 108 across this 4D matrix. I've done a video on that to show how it connects to binomial theorem, and it's actually a magnificent way to extract these numbers. Also as a calculator to do very simply with a very simple equation. You can do massive, it's a calculator, and I'm sure that this is one of the underlying reasons for it. But again, the connection to the golden ratio, okay? But in astronomy, for instance, 108 times the diameter of the sun, distance from sun to the earth. 108 times the diameter of the earth is the diameter of the sun. 108 times the diameter of the moon is the distance from the earth to the moon. In the long scale, 108 will give us the equatorial diameter of the moon as well. Now, this is an older video, so I could have added a few more to it, but this is, at least in my mind, and I believe if you viewed all the stuff that I've done in regards to this, that these connections recur over and over again. So original Stonehenge phase 1, that's where we get the long foot, and that's why long feet is so special, and how much it connects to sun, earth and moon measurements. It's one of these that's fallen out of favour. But even in the modern mile, for instance, the radius of the moon, 1,080 miles. Without a doubt, other researchers have gone into this as well, the use of these ancient measure and geometry, geodesic measures, but and how the modern unit, such as a meter, is actually not modern at all, and how it connects to this astronomical knowledge. For instance, the Earth orbits the Sun at its fastest point at 108,000 kilometers an hour, or 66,000 miles per hour at the slower point. Again, I've repeated that across so many other videos, how 66 at 66 feet is encoded, for instance, the streets of Sydney by Macquarie. But okay, 100, the speed of the Earth at its fastest point is essentially the polar diameter of Saturn. And how Saturn, Chronos and time comes together is another thing as well. Equatorial circumference, by definition, 21,600 nautical miles, but 10,800 breaths per day, 10,800 breaths per night in tantric systems. Well, it could be many, but for instance, Venus, 108 million kilometers from Venus to the Sun. the way that Venus forms a pentagram in its the way this orbit with Venus and the Earth come together. 108-year cycle for alignment at perigee for the Mars and the Earth, while Mars has 0.108 the mass of the Earth. I could have added more and more. This particular piece of animation is older, and well, again, it extends so much further. Arkavut Napishtim, from where the flood myth, in the Sumerian ancient flood myth, again going back, one of probably the oldest books going around. The descriptions just is 108 or 10,080 over and over again, while even New Jerusalem fits into this pattern. So, for instance, the maximum visible edge length of New Jerusalem would be 108 again. Began with it, but the shrine, Basilica, National Shrine for Immaculate Conception in Washington, 108 feet and 153, while Red Square in Moscow, this is older, and this is before the revolution, but that's 1,080 feet and 153 cubits wide. Just to make the point that 108 feet might be by accident or because there's some standardized measurement, which is not the case at all, because these were the old ones were built before standardized building supplies, etc. But each one has a secondary reference to it. For instance, Wat Pho, 153 feet long with 108 symbols on each foot. Now, pentatonic tuning, we see A is 108 or 432 in Pythagorean or 440 in the modern. Now, again, each one of those numbers is too often repeated in great pieces of architecture across the world for it to be ignored. And so if we just do a review through those, we're just going to see, like, across the ancient world, across cultures, across the oceans, this is used over and over in these great monuments, these great pieces of public infrastructure that were built to last as well. That's like another point. They went to great effort to build things such as the Oshoro stones. Now, there's not a palace there. There's no reason for it, if you want to say for someone like a king to live in or whatever. It's built for some sort of purpose. Great effort went into that. They could have done something more productive, let's say. Now they are very productive, but build a palace or something like that. But the stone circle builders across the world, the monument builders, repeated in the measurement itself, but also in the forms and other symbolisms, just over and over again, and they've very cleverly passed it on to us in geometric forms. In the the origin of a 360-degree compass is a bit shrouded in mystery. Now, some people say around about 1,000 years ago, other people say a little over 2,000 years ago. Well, I think the evidence is that it actually extends, just like the supposedly modern foot and meter extends back to Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, going back 4,500 years, and if not more, and that through that particular system, they've had excellent astronomical knowledge. We know that they did. That's becoming more and more clear each day. For instance, a recent study of the Ring of Brodgar and some other stone circles up there in Scotland and the north of England have proven through a computer analysis, statistical analysis, so it's 0.0000001% that it was a coincidence. It was only our mindset that these people were ignorant savages who were just sort of pushing stones around for some religious reason. For instance, like Neil Oliver and the Gatekeepers of history, they'll present some sort of Stonehenge documentary, and someone finds a little artifact, and then they do this grand CGI. It was a religious thing, and they just sort of march, and they'll do it and they'll present it as if it's somehow solid, as if it's an acceptable thing to say. Well, it's not, because in those same for public consumption documentaries and books, establishment, they go to great lengths to discredit these type of things without actually addressing the issue. They just they'll bring up one or two numbers, and they know very well the greater extent of this, but they'll bring up one or two, offer some supposedly rational explanation for it, but if they had the balls to put down the whole story and the whole argument and argue through it, they would they would lose, and that's the only way to put it. Because if I were to examine, well, not just this, but like not just 108 feet, but all the other physical evidence, and then put that together, it's clear that firstly that these supposedly separate cultures, including the Americas and across the Mediterranean, North Africa, Europe, Asia, and over to East Asia, why would they? How could they have, by accident, firstly, have sort of just popped up out of the ground all at the same time with all this very advanced geometric knowledge? Like, we don't understand the Great Pyramids, and we're still bumbling over how they were able to do these in the dark past, when they had no library, supposedly no libraries or no experience to draw upon. But they did it. It's there, it's written in stone, and it's repeated across the globe, including, again, over to Mayans, Aztecs, Olmecs. They chose these same proportions, they chose these same particular numbers. And we know that, again, each day as the layers get peeled back, their mathematical knowledge, their advanced systems are becoming more and more obvious, and well, the establishment just cannot pull back from that. They're so invested in their dogma, because it's a dogma. It's not, it's not solid. They're made assumptions, and they're just going to hold to it no matter what, because firstly reputations would be lost, and book sales would be lost, and that's their bread and butter. And greed is one of the most destructive forces on this earth. And you have to get used to the fact that the academics are not like some kindly old grandfather full of honesty and telling the truth all the time. They're very invested. They're very driven by agendas and by protecting certain, well, dogma. They're essentially no different from the religionists, which they so often criticize. They're stuck in a fundamentalist view, which they cannot shirk themselves from. They're only open to the evidence which backs up their preconceptions, and they're just fundamentally resistant to anything that alters that. Now, there's been plenty of not just one or two pieces, massive amounts of information have come out regarding the fact that that ancient civilizations were in contact, and that this knowledge has also been passed down through. So we still have it. Well, even the date of trade, so for instance, trade from Egypt to Scotland and England, again, just keeps getting pushed back all the time. And we have to really basically redraw it from page one by looking at the data, not by not by first writing a story and then trying to fit the data to fit it. That's the opposite of the scientific method, and the so-called the gatekeepers just don't work that way. They're just going to stick to their viewpoint no matter what. But if you just trace it back through time, this has been a very short one, and again, this is I could update this more and more, and other researchers, Randall Carlson, for instance, are just blowing the standard history out of the water, and it's, well, this can be measured, it can be tested, it can be weighed, it can be counted. It's very tangible. This is not some mystic spiritualism that I'm showing you. This is, again, measurable, solid data. And so with that, I hope you got something out of it. Again, 108, so it's often repeated in all my videos in regards to the architecture, well, here in Sydney, especially most recent ones, but again across the modern world, going back through the medieval period, back to Greco-Roman, going back to Indus, Egypt, and Mesoamerican cultures as well. And so with that, yep, have a good one and be kind to one another.